Hello and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the week of November 22nd, 2010. This is the Ask Video Mail, and welcome to the site. First, a little bit of news. It was CTN this weekend. It was a ton of fun to meet everybody at CTN, all the animators, all the students and professionals. Everyone has just the most amazing respect for the craft, and it was just super exciting to meet a lot of like-minded people and hand out the promo codes that more than likely you are using right now. So I'm really glad that you decided to use the code and have come to the site, and I'm very excited to get as much into this promo period as possible so that you'll stay on and stay a subscriber to the site. And this is one of the ways that you can participate in the site. So if you have a question, please submit it to webmaster@kennyroy.com, or you can just use the contact form that is on the site. Just click on Contact Me on the left panel, or at the top, I believe it is, and you can just send a question to the Ask Video Mail. I ask that you put your subject as Ask Video Mail, and then just a brief synopsis of your question so that I can make sure that all of the questions go to the same place. It's a great way to participate in the site. I feel like the site is off to a great start. There's already some discussions that are very interesting going on in the forums, and obviously the Ask Video Mail is a great way to get a demo of a question or a problem that you're having in animation right now. So thank you again for being here at KennyRoy.com, and without further ado, this week's question comes from Nick Barber. The question is, do you have a particular strategy when it comes to managing elbow and knee pole vectors? Any particular do's and don'ts? Well, Nick is probably having some of the problems that are common to using IK arms and legs, and that's that when a pole vector gets out of control, it really dominates the motion that's on that limb. When we're posing, we have a tendency to just grab the major controls. What I mean by that is you have a character, let's say just like this character here. This is Bloke. He's a free character. He's a great free character. You should definitely check him out because he's got all sorts of movability and just a really nice setup. However, when you have a character that is created in a T-pose like this, which most are, there's a tendency when you're working with them to just basically use these controls to pose him around. This is the IK hand control. He's got his IK feet enabled by default, and this is the FK over here. But it's common to just grab these controls and pose the character. So you might be using just a few of the controls to get a character pose, but only the direction of the hand and the direction of the foot is really determined by that. So what I'm getting at is that the pole vector actually has, by manipulating it, a very large impact on the way that pose is going to work in motion. So the first tip I have for pole vectors is definitely, always, always, always key them with the rest of the controls. Okay, so a little quick tip. If you click up here on Maya, if you're using Maya, there's these three different choices. One's all objects on, one's all objects off, and then save to shelf. Save to shelf, if you have a shelf, like I just loaded a blank shelf, okay, it will save the current display or selection mask to the shelf. So right now it's all just NURBS curves. And that's good because most rigs use only NURBS curves for their controls. So I'm going to save this one to shelf, okay, and it says mask, but that's a selection mask. Okay, let's say I have all of them on and I'm grabbing joints and geometry and whatever. Well, that's not good. I can just click right here and it'll reduce it to the mask that I chose before, which is great for animating. It saves you a quick second of turning all of these off. I used to click all over here, and that's kind of a waste, right? So I just click on mask, and now I'm back to curves. Anyway, so when you're posing your character, it's common to do just a selection like that. If you're using C-sets or you're using it some other way to get your selection, well, more power to you. But I find it common to drag a selection around my controls, and sometimes I miss that pole vector. So the first tip is to always make sure that you are keying your pole vector on the pose, because the pole vector shouldn't be this thing that is kind of outside the keying process. It has a lot to do with the pose. The second thing is, and especially with very intricate and complex arm movement, especially when there's a lot of full body movement as well, I do what I call flying the pole vectors. It's like flying a light, right? So you grab it, and even if this is the shape that you want in this elbow right here, okay, you drag it away and put it somewhere over here. Why? Because then if you look right here, the elbow is pointing towards it more smoothly, whereas if it is as close as it was before, the elbow is going to, be pointing up and down. See, it has a greater effect the closer it is. Let's move it way close so you can really tell. See? Whereas it's probably more often the case that the pose that you have in the elbow right here, for instance, is something that you want to go a little bit more smoothly in and out of. So again, I fly the pole vectors out a little bit. This causes a problem with the first tip, because if you look, you're probably going to lose, you're not going to be able to select them both at the exact same time. So you just need to be careful. Again, rule number one is to key the pole vectors with the pose as necessary. The other thing that you can use is some controls or some rigs have a twist control. This one does not. The AM rigs do. Many other rigs do. There's an upside and there's a downside. The first thing is that when you have a pole vector, you've flown your pole vector out to the a safe distance, you can get into a lot of counter animation if you use a twist control. So twist controls are a little bit dangerous. One thing that twist controls are good for, and I don't have them on this rig, but the example will definitely hold up on this rig. Let's say you have a very heavy character. Let's say I'm going to have him take a really big step. Anticipate it a little bit. Okay, so we have this big step, boom, like that, okay? So, just quickly keyed. So what I'm looking for is a lot of weight if it's a really big character, right? So let's have him, be lifting his foot all throughout here. But then what we're going to do is we're going to lift the foot up and kind of have it slam down. What pole vectors can be very useful for is to make it so that that impact has a lot of impact and it feels really heavy. So I'm going to let him gain a little bit on his foot. So it's kind of like he's bringing it up and see that? He gains on it just a little bit. And I'm really quickly keying this, but you'll get the picture. And then that was about 5 frames, so I'm going to have it come down in 2 frames. Boom. And slam. Okay? I'm going to go quickly into my graph editor, make sure that that Y curve really accelerates in, real fast in. Okay, just smooth these out just a little bit. Okay. All right. And then, oops. And then take a look. All right, so you see it whips up and boom, it really feels like it slams, okay? What's nice to do, and you can do this with the twist or with a pole vector, it's it's fine either way, but with a twist, it's nice because you can have your pole vectors. I'm going to fly this pole vector out just a little bit, okay? And then on top of this, you get that twist, okay? So actually, will this work? No, swivel, pivot. No, this won't work, but you'll get the picture, okay? So what I do is right when it hits, you have just a little bit of wiggle back and forth on that leg. Okay, and I just keyed that straight ahead, and as you can see, just watching this pole vector, that wiggle, you know, is kind of, you know, kind of minor, whatever. But when you watch the animation playback, it actually has this really nice kind of quality to it. In fact, I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger. I'm a big fan of doing as many changes in panel as possible. I'm sorry, in the graph editor. I said panel because I was thinking of the panel. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I also want it to be a little bit more bowed out. Okay, and because I really like to do changes in graph editor, I'm just going to show you how to do that right now. Okay. So now we're just going to grab all these keys, and I said I want it bigger, right? So that's a very simple scale. Just going to scale it up like that, and I'm going to flat this out so that it comes to a nice gradual stop. Okay, so let's just watch that one more time. Yeah, beautiful. Look at that. Boom. So this is great on very large creatures. We use this a lot on King Kong. We always, like, he'd slam his foot and just a little bit of wiggle on the knee. We had twist controls on that rig. This is great for if you're doing dinosaurs. You can definitely look King Kong again. We use this a lot with the dinosaurs, with the V-Rexes or T-Rexes, and they slam their feet and you get a little bit of knee just wiggle on there. This is a really nice thing to use. So the 3 rules basically: number 1, definitely key your pole vectors with your pose. Don't leave them out of your selection. Be very careful about that. Number 2, always make sure that your pole vectors are a safe distance away. I like to, what I like to call, fly them. So get them a little bit outside, further away from your character, but be careful to continue to do rule number 1 when you're doing that. And then number 3, if you have a twist control, be careful of counter animating that twist against a pole vector. But if you do have twist, or even if you don't, you can do it with a pole vector. It's a nice thing to use to show a little bit of weight with a pose. Okay, now again, this rig is a free rig. His name is Bloke. It's a fun rig to work with. It doesn't have all the controls that I've talked about today, but it still really is a nice rig to practice with. And so I recommend everyone practice flying their pole vectors and keying it with the pose and everything that I showed off today. Okay. Well, that is it for this week. Thank you for the great question. Thank you to Nick Barber. You can have your question answered if you send an email to webmaster@kennyroy.com or use the contact form that is on kennyroy.com to ask your questions and maybe see it in an Ask Video Mail sometime soon. Thank you for coming to kennyroy.com. Thank you for being a member of the site. It's all about you guys, the members. So as always, rock on.